Hi everybody, this is Brandy Curley, and I am, as you can see behind me, in my children's very messy playroom at the other end of the house because it is 12:30 in the morning and my boys are asleep. Having said that, I am obviously a mother of two boys, a wife, 30 years old, and have been back in school for 3 years after taking a 10 plus year break right out of high school. I worked from the time I was 16, full time, first starting off in fast food and moving up from there. Eventually got my first office job when I was 18. Then went on into the legal field for 5 plus years and decided that was not for me, so that's why I ended up in school and majoring in education, because I have always loved working with children and teaching children, and I'm constantly teaching my kids every day. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. You may or may not notice that I have somewhat of a different accent. I've lived here in Albany for more years than I would like to admit. My family up north says I have a southern accent, and southern natives say I have somewhat of a northern accent. Louisville is still my home. That's where most of my family is. I lived there and was mostly raised there with my grandparents. I did not know my mother. Visited my father and who I called my mom, which was my dad's girlfriend, like every 2 weeks, kind of like a child of divorce would. I didn't know much about my mother other than she had me when she was 16 and she left when I was really young. Life for me living with my grandparents was really good. We lived in a typical middle class neighborhood, and I actually went to the school right down the street from us. I kind of stood out from the other kids in my school. It was a mostly white school, and even though I identified as white, I am obviously darker than your typical white person, and that is because I am part Mexican, part Apache, and then a mixture of different European cultures. So I was occasionally asked, what I was, and a couple of teachers tried to convince me that I wasn't white, but that's who my family and I identified with. Despite all that, everybody was very accepting and treated me as an equal. When my father was offered a job opportunity down here in Georgia, I was given the option to stay there or move. And because I did not want to miss out on my brother and sister growing up, I decided to move with them. But it was a complete culture shock to me, both inside the home and outside the home. My my stepmom, her children, my brother and sister, were her number one priority. She did treat me differently than she treated them, not in a good way. She didn't hold a job. Her main priorities were watching her TV shows and partying. My dad did work, but she pretty much ran things around the house and he followed suit. I grew up very quickly in that I was taking care of the house and pretty much raising my brother and sister, making sure they were taken care of and that their school was taken care of. And I kind of fell, to the background as far as my priorities went. Having said that, I did marry the day before I turned 21 to a man that is 4.5 years older than me. He is from here in South Georgia. His family is actually from the mountains in Kentucky, but it's a completely different culture than from what I've grown up from in Kentucky. They're true Southerners. They're not really religious, but they have a lot of the traditional Southern values about marriage and family. They treat me like I am one of their own, so I feel very welcome in his family, and we've been together for 12 years and we'll be married for 10 years this coming April. We live in a neighborhood that is your it's your typical middle class neighborhood. We do live on the east side of town, which typically has a bad reputation for poverty levels and crime, but our particular neighborhood is very good when it comes to crime. There's very little crime, and there's a big diverse group of families and people that live in this neighborhood. You have your young families, both white and African American, younger married couples with children, and then you have a few Hispanic families and your retirees, your grandparents that live here as well. My son, my oldest son, he goes to school across town at Lincoln Elementary Magnet. It's a very diverse school. He's been exposed to various different cultures, socially and ethnically. Excuse me. So I want him to be exposed to as much as possible different from what he knows in his typical life. I plan on doing that with both my children. That's very important to me. I want them to know as much as possible about what is out there in the world, and that's what I want for my students as well. Touching back on me, I did eventually meet my mother, and she has 2 stepsons and 2 daughters that are my biological sisters. She is half Apache and half Mexican, so that's where a lot of that came from. I don't know much about her culture, and I don't really delve into that area of her life because it brings up stuff from the past. We have a really good relationship now, so I really don't want to dwell on the past, and I just want to focus on the future. So that doesn't play a huge identifier in who I am, but it does play a small role in who I am. Back on my classroom, I hope to engage all of my students in the various cultures that are out there, both socially and religiously, and those from different countries. I hope to focus on first the students that are in my class and the various places that they are from and their religions, and how they are raised, so that the students in my class can learn about them and they're able to ask questions and create an open forum with their classmates so that they can feel comfortable with one another. And I think that would help me to learn a lot about different cultures as well. I'm attaching also a slideshow that I've put together. It may touch a little bit on what I may have missed, and it is a little bit more about me. So feel free to take a look at it, and thanks for stopping by.